Hello BookTube. This is part 24 of my 2022 library tour. Today I'm starting the science fiction and fantasy section of my library tour. For the next 21 installments of the library tour, I'll only be talking about science fiction fantasy because that's how many science fiction fantasy shelves I've got. So this is part 1 of science fiction and fantasy. Let's get going. The first book raises so many questions about my collecting habits. This is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I had a go at this novel about a decade or so ago and checked it out from a local library and build on it within the first chapter or two. I could not get into it. But, The Blade itself, I think, is one of those works that I might have a better opinion on it with the Bell Redemption. Or it could also be Joe Abercrombie is one of the major voices in writing in fantasy today. So, as a collector, I would want to have this, but again, I really need to have another go at it and see what I make of it, and if I don't like it, I really probably should get rid of it. Anyway. And I also have Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. I think this is his kind of sort of maybe YA-esque trilogy or series. And I picked it up a few years ago from Golden's Book Exchange, a used bookstore in Waco, Texas, that also sells comics. And it does have a fairly good, I would think, science fiction and fantasy section, although what it really has a lot of is romances. So many romances. Next is a duology that I have, like a quartet that's in a bind-up of 2 books each. This is Shadow and Betrayal, which includes A Shadow in Summer and A Betrayal in Winter, volumes 1 and 2 of the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. I want to say I had a go at A Shadow in Summer and build on it, but then decided I want to have this, maybe as a Bell Redemption or to have a complete series. So I have these 2, and I also have The Price of War, which includes An Autumn War and The Price of Spring, also by Daniel Abraham. And then I have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is one of the most popular science fiction novels of the past 40-50 years. It's a humorous novel. I think I had a go at it maybe 10 or so years ago, and I built on it. And I saw this copy for, I think it was like 25 cents at the book sale Nook at the West Waco Library and Genealogy Center, the library in Waco that I go to. Next is another book I'm pretty sure I picked up from the sale Nook. This is The Coming of the Horse Clans by Robert Adams. Don't know much about it though, because I just picked it up. I had a phase where I pretty much picked up every work of science fiction or fantasy that I saw in the book sale Nook. Next is not a book I picked up from the book sale Nook. I think I got this from Amazon. This is Throne of the Crescent Moon by Saladin Ahmed. This is I would say this is a sword and sorcery-esque novel inspired by Middle Eastern history and culture. And I remember bailing on it, I think the first time I tried it, and then reading it and rather enjoying it maybe the second time I had a go at it. And then I have The Glamour Thieves by Don Allman. This is the book one of the Blue Unicorn series. This is an erotic, urban fantasy novel about a gay orc who has a fetish for cars, getting roped into a caper by his elf ex-boyfriend, and it's terrible. It is just so terrible. And next is Shield by Paul Anderson. Again, I picked it up from the Friends at the Library Book Sale Nook. On a Pale Horse by Piers Anthony, which again I picked up from the Book Sale Nook, and I want to say this is about somebody who accidentally kills death and has to become death or something. It did come out in 1983, and I mentioned that I might have a go at this at some point for the fourth year book tag. Although, when I say if I don't know if I remember, I think I weaseled my way out of pledging to read On a Pale Horse. Because, pledging to do something is the surest way to bail city. And even mentioning maybe wanting to do that might end up jinxing me. Next is another book by Piers Anthony, and yet again I picked up from the Book Sale Nook. This is A Geese of the Gargoyle, Xanth novel. And then I have Dark Mondays by Cage Baker. This is a short story collection that I picked up 2 or 3 years ago. I saw, I think, a review of the collection, or kind of an essay on Cage Baker in Blackgate website. Blackgate used to be a fantasy magazine before it became, I think, mostly a review site, and no longer in print. But anyway, so I saw the cover and really quite liked it. And so I picked it up. And I've read the collection a few times over the years. It's got some really good stories. It's got some clunkers, which is not that surprising. I quite like the first story, The Two Old Women, A Portrait with Flames. It's quite good. A Calamari Curls, Oh False Young Man I quite liked. So yeah, pretty neat collection. Reorganize these somewhat. Okay, next comes a completed trilogy, although it was later expanded into 2 trilogies, which I don't have the other 3 books. But anyway, this is The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. So this novel is an example of me bailing on a book and then coming back to it months or years later and changing my opinion on it, or at least finishing it. So I tried it and bailed on it within the first chapter or 2, if not even in the prologue. And then I checked it back out from the library and managed to finish it, and I remember quite enjoying it. But it has been quite a while since I finished it. And I don't think the library had the other volumes in the series, because my local library is rather spotty with science fiction and fantasy. So I decided I wanted to have this in my collection and to add the other 2 books in this particular series. This is The Warrior Prophet. This is book 2 of the Prince of Nothing series. And This is the Thousandfold Thought, Book 3. And I think these are actually 3 different editions of the book. Next are 3 novels by Ian Banks. He was a Scottish science fiction writer who wrote some really interesting space opera, most of which were a part of the Culture series. As Ian Banks, he was also a more literary writer whose work I kind of want to look into, but I've never gotten around to checking out his non-science fiction work. This is his first science fiction novel, Consider Phlebas, which I've had quite the annoying reading experience of. So I've tried the novel 4 times, and I've never quite gotten into it. It just doesn't work for me, which is rather frustrating. This is the second Culture novel, The Player of Games, which again I had one go at and it didn't really gel with, which was disappointing, because the third of the Culture novels that I have, I really enjoy, and even though I've only read it once, and was really the impetus for me to pick up the other 2, and at one point wanting to collect all of Banks's science fiction work. This is Accession, one of the later Culture novels. It's about a false flag operation organized by one of the minds, the hyper-intelligent artificial intelligences that run the Culture, a massive anarchistic, socialistic space polity. And I remember quite enjoying the novel. I read it on an airplane when I was moving from San Francisco back to Texas, or maybe I read it a little bit afterwards. I don't remember. But anyway, I really enjoyed it at the time, but it has also been about it's been almost 15 years since I've read it, because it was in like 2006. So, yeah, probably well overdue for a reread. Next are 2 books by Clive Barker, of which I picked up from the Friends of the Library book sale nook at the West Waco Library and Genealogy Center. This is Magicka, which I've been interested in reading for quite a few years. I think I saw a copy of this at my hometown library and never picked it up. And then I saw this for 25 cents and I picked it up. And I want to say this was... Oh, okay, so this was from the Hewitt Community Library. So yeah, one of these days I really need to get around to reading it. I also have Everville by Clive Barker, which was from the Waco McLean County Library. So this one was a withdrawal from them. Again, haven't gotten around to it, and I probably should. And the last book on this shelf is a relatively new work of fantasy. This is The Bone Ships by R.J. Baker, which is about a fleet of ships made out of dragon bones. I haven't read it yet, and I probably should. Fortunately, I don't have the other books in this series, which I do sometimes do. Which actually, the first 3 books I'll be talking about Monday is an example of that. I bought an entire trilogy in one go, and I'll talk about it on Monday. So anyway, BookTube, that was shelf number 1 of science fiction and fantasy. I'll be back Monday with shelf 2 of science fiction and fantasy and part 25 of the overall 2022 library tour. So till then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great afternoon and weekend, and stay safe.